Good evening and welcome. Thank you so much for giving us some of your time this evening. My name's Jo. I'm one of the directors with Ten2Two. Ten2Two, we are a specialist part-time recruitment consultancy. We've been around for about 16 years now, so we were one of the pioneers in the part-time movement, and have helped hundreds upon thousands of people secure part-time and flexible roles. And then hopefully helps them stay in those roles with the support of people like my lovely guest this evening, Debbie. Debbie, we were just talking, started her career in social housing, and then took a break to have a family and has returned as a coach to executives, but also to individuals right across the spectrum. So people starting out in their career right the way through to senior leaders. And this evening, she's going to be sharing some of her wisdom with us about how to really make an impact when you start a new role and make sure those first 90 days are super successful. So any of you who are chomping at the bit and ready to start something either before Christmas or in January, congratulations. And hopefully this will be really helpful for you. I know a number of you starting haven't yet secured that new role, and well done for coming along today, because I think it shows real strength of character, real promise that you are sure you're going to get that role. And I'm sure that everything that Debbie talks about this evening is going to be really helpful for you when you do. And hopefully we will be the ones to place you. So yeah, there's lots of us on the line now. Just to take you through some housekeeping. We are going to be going at rocket speed. There's a lot of content for us to cover. The presentation will take us through until around 8:30ish, and then we'll have some time for Q&A afterwards. You will get a follow-up email tomorrow with some notes and a lovely workbook that Debbie has put together. So don't feel as though you need to scribble away furiously now, but of course do feel free to take notes if you wish. The recording will also be on YouTube in a few days' time, so you'll be able to rewatch at your leisure if you want to catch up on anything or just have another listen. There is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen if you're on a laptop or a PC. If you're on an Apple device, I don't know where it is. But do feel free to ask questions. If we can't get to you during Debbie's presentation, then as I said, there will be a Q&A after. And if for any reason we can't get to you in the Q&A, then either Debbie or myself will come back to you in the coming days to make sure that we answer as many questions as possible. And we'll compile a kind of Q&A document as well, just so that that information and that knowledge gets shared. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Debbie. Thank you so much, Debbie.
Thank you, Jo. So hello, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen quickly. Here we go. So new job, mastering your first 90 days. As Jo said, my name's Debbie Denyer. I'm an executive coach from Coach the Difference Limited. So a really scary statistic for you here. So 30% of people leave their new job in the first 90 days. So if you think about all that hard work that's gone into rewriting your CV, tailoring it to roles, going through the application process, going through interviews, getting to that final point and starting the role, and then leaving within the first 90 days. So why is that happening? So the kind of most common reasons for why that happen are that people don't feel connected to the company mission. There's interpersonal conflict, they feel unwelcome, they're overwhelmed with information, lack of training, inconsistent expectations, and a lack of feedback. Now that figure in terms of the number of people who leave within the first 90 days has actually gone up over the past year. And so that might also be affected by the kind of hybrid working that we're in at the moment, with people feeling that they're not getting that kind of onboarding in the way that maybe they would have done previously. So today we're going to look at how you can avoid being one of those people. So how you can prepare yourself, how you can manage risks, understand expectations, build key relationships, establish credibility, and have a plan. So what I'd like you to do first of all is to just drop the number into the chat, into the Q&A, for the image that best represents how you would feel about starting a new role. So if you've already got a role lined up, or if you haven't, maybe think back to when you started a new role before. How do you think you feel when you first start that new role? Which picture best represents that for you?
We're getting a lot of 4s and 6s come through. It seems to be a recurrent number. Oh, and there's some 3s, a couple of 2s, 4s and 6s.
Okay.
Oh, somebody feels a 1. I'm glad. I'm glad. As long as that's an excited jump and she's not throwing herself off a cliff. Can't really tell.
Okay, and if anybody, so on those 4s and 6s, does anybody want to just give a word to kind of represent why they've picked that? So what does that represent to you in terms of a word?
Excited. I don't think that's a 4 or a 6. Daunting, overwhelmed for number 4. Fear, daunting again, overwhelmed again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Number 4, so much to navigate and work out. Yeah, anxious, uncertainty. These are all really good words that I'm sure you hear all the time, Debbie.
Yeah, definitely. So you're not alone. You've got other people on this call who are feeling in the same way as you. And it's really common. People that I work with, coaching them when they're starting a new role, they feel in a similar way too. So let's kind of look at how we can prepare ourselves. So when you first are applying for a role, so before you even take on the role, you can act as a bit of a detective. And I'm sure that all of you already will be checking the website of the company that you're applying for, to kind of get an understanding of what the culture of that company might be like. But beyond that, you can also then, using LinkedIn, you can look at the connections of people that you may know that work there and reach out to them to find out from them, does what's on the website reflects the reality of working there. You can also look at the social media accounts of people who work at that company and see whether they're posting about the company, see what kind of feel you get for it. You know, are they proud to work there? Is the company mission and the values reflected in the kinds of ways people are talking about it? When you get to interview stage, you can ask the question, you know, what do you most like about working here, to give you a sense of that culture. And also things like, how does the company mission or how do the company values translate into day-to-day work, recruitment, training, benefits, so that you get a real kind of picture. So that kind of helps with this not feeling connected to the company mission. Make sure that you have done your homework on that beforehand. Interpersonal conflict. So again, when you're at interview stage, or if you know anybody who already works there, be asking questions about the dynamic of the team. You know, is there anybody else internally who's applied for this position, so that you've got an idea of, is anyone's nose going to be rubbed the wrong way for when you start? What's the dynamic of the team? What are some of the key challenges you think that I might face? And if you're being interviewed by your potential manager, then, you know, what's your leadership style? What approach do you take? So that gives you an understanding of, is there going to be a conflict here? And remember that the job interview is a two-way communication. It's a meeting between yourself and the company to find out, one, whether they think you're going to be the right fit, but also whether you think that you're going to be the right fit. You know, is this the right company for you? So around that point of feeling unwelcome, asking them questions about buddying, mentors, onboarding process, opportunity to meet other people, potentially face to face. If it's a remote environment, is that something that's an option? If not, then, you know, is there a kind of opportunity for you to meet people through sort of virtual coffees? Is there a Slack channel? What's that kind of feel about the kind of welcomeness of the organisation? feeling overwhelmed with information. Now, if you think about it from the perspective of the recruiting manager, they have a problem. There's a gap for them. And so they're going out to recruit someone to fill that gap, to solve that problem. And they may have had a period of time without anybody in that role, or it may be a new role that they're putting in place because there's an issue with the amount of workload. So for that recruiting manager, they are absolutely delighted that you're about to start. And they're thinking, fantastic, we can pass all this stuff their way and we copy them into this email and that email. And, you know, we can hand all this stuff back that I've been doing that on top of my day job. And so it's very easy for you to feel overwhelmed at that starting point. So it's really important that you get an understanding of, is there somebody in the role already? Is there going to be a handover? Has there been a gap? If there's been a gap, what are the key priorities? What are the key things that you need to be focusing on? Talking to them about how you learn best, and talking to them about what are their kind of key expectations and the onboarding induction process for you. And being able to kind of also feel confident in saying, you know, you will get the best from me if we work like this. You know, this is what I need in order to be at my best. Because they want the best from you. So, you know, you're at this sort of negotiating point at this stage. And that feeds into the kind of lack of training as well. So, again, are there any development opportunities? What's their kind of their training like? Are there potential opportunities for you to be mentored? Or, you know, is there promotion opportunities in the future? All of those things you can be asking before you even get in the door. And then we're going to pick up inconsistent expectations and lack of feedback as well. So you've done a bit of preparation. Now you need to kind of manage some of the key risks. So this is in your workbooks as well. So what you can do is you can assess yourself on a score of kind of 1 to 10 for each of these different risks. And then the ones that score the highest, you can then look at, well, what can I do to mitigate some of those risks? So is the new job in a different location? Is it going to impact your commute time if you've got to go into the office? Maybe you need to move. And if you need to move, then, you know, what impact does that have maybe on your family, on their school, on their work life as well? So thinking about those impacts and how to kind of mitigate those. And again, in terms of your family, maybe if you've had a period of time where you've not been in work and you've spent more time with your family, then changing that dynamic can cause resentment, and you need the support from your family network in you being successful within that role. So talking about that, thinking about that, and really working through how that's going to work in practice. If you're being promoted, sometimes you can have a kind of a fear of failure, and that can hold us back from working at our best. It can hold us back from, you know, stepping out of our comfort zone and working at the level that we're expected to work at. So thinking those things through first, reflecting on that first, and thinking about, well, what is my kind of natural comfort zone? What are the things that are potentially going to be a bit of a stretch for me? And how can I manage my confidence and my mindset around that? Again, if you were moving kind of sideways in a role, or if you were moving downwards potentially from a role that you've done previously, being able to think about, well, what are the benefits that this is bringing me? And focusing on that and shifting your mindset. Which sector you're in? Is it a sector that's new for you? If so, you know, what do you know about the sector? How can you learn about the sector? Are there kind of social media groups, conferences, memberships, webinars that you can join? Other people you can speak to within the sector? Working hours, are they changing? Again, what's the impact on your family? And also, what's the time of day where you're most productive, and how can you use that to your best within the role? Learning, again, what's the gap between your sort of current skills where you are now and where you need to be, and what can you do? to bridge that gap. How do you learn best? And then thinking about systems. Quite often when we join a new organisation, a new role, there's suddenly all these new systems to learn, and making sure that you're kind of aware of how do you best learn a new system. Is it somebody sitting and showing you? Is it just having a play around and thinking that through, so that you're prepared for it? And then the team. So I mentioned earlier about the team dynamic. Have you got to recruit people? Is the predecessor still at the company? Will there be a handover? Is there conflict? Making sure you've kind of thought those things through as well. And then finally, are there kind of financial implications for the new role? You know, cost of new clothing, salary changes, potentially travel. So for each of those, score yourself out of 10, and then look at, for the ones that are high, what could you do to mitigate some of those risks? So this is me on my first day of school. And I often think that starting a new job is a bit like starting school, because there's a huge amount to learn and you're excited, but you're anxious, as we heard earlier. And you want to make a good impression, you want to be liked. And sometimes we can change the way we act in those situations. But I went into school on my first day, and I'd got pockets in this summer dress, and I really liked the pockets, and I'd been walking around at home with my hands in the pockets. And I went to school and no one else had pockets. And so all of a sudden I felt a lot less confident. I felt like I didn't fit in. And when I felt less confident, I was less confident to be me. And it just chips away at my confidence slightly. And so it's really easy when we're starting something new, when we're stepping out of our comfort zone, for our confidence to be knocked quite quickly. And if you think back to that thing where, you know, people left within the first 90 days of the role, quite often that's because their confidence has been knocked. They're feeling overwhelmed by the situation, and they're not sure, they can't see a way through, a way to overcome that. And so the answer is to leave. So I'm just going to do a quick Mensy quiz. So if you, can you see the Mensy now, Jo?
Yes. Yep. That's coming
okay.
clearly.
So if you go to menti.com and then you use this code here, so 394254442. And thinking back to when you've started a new role, which of those things have you done within a new role? So if you go to menti.com, it will give you an option to pick, and you can pick more than one.
Doesn't have to be on a completely different screen. If you've not got access to another device, you can just minimize us, and there we go. Fantastic stuff. Thank you. Can you see those results as well, Debbie?
Yeah.
Good stuff. I feel like a dinosaur with stuff like this. I get so impressed with the magic.
Okay, so we've got a few different ones coming through, so I'll just talk about some of those. So at the moment, set unrealistic expectations is coming out as the highest. And this again comes from a place of kind of insecurity quite often, because we either are setting ourselves really high expectations or we're setting other people really high expectations, because we want to demonstrate that we're achieving, we want to demonstrate that we're doing a good job, and then we can overpromise and underdeliver, when we've just started. Next up, we've got stuck with what you know. And if you think back to me talking about the comfort zone, that again is really common. And you may have taken on a promotion and you may be expected to be more strategic, whereas you've previously been more operational. But you're in a new place and you've got all these new things to learn, the systems, the people, how you get things done around here, who you contact for these things. And all of that feels really overwhelming. And so you just do the things that you know how to do well. And that then means that you're not then performing to the expectations of the employer, and also what you've potentially put across the interview. But it's really common, and it comes from that place of kind of fear and safety. Neglected to build horizontal relationships. Again, this is really common. We focus on the boss, we focus on the people that we're managing, and we forget about the people who can support us, the people to our side who are on the same level as us, who can be our support network. And that's really key, making sure that you're building those relationships. Going in with the answer, again, comes from good intentions, but we're going in, we want to be able to demonstrate that we can solve this, we can fix this, we can make a good impression and be credible, but we're not listening and finding out from people what's happened before, what's gone well, what's not gone so well. And then launching too many initiatives is similar to the setting unrealistic expectations, going in and saying, let's change this, change this, change this, change this. And again, it's about our kind of feeling that gives us some sort of credibility, but maybe not having spent that time to really observe and understand and listen before we do that. And that can damage those relationships within the organisation that are already there.
I think what's lovely about this, Debbie, is that everybody on this webinar this evening can see that they're not alone. We've all done these things. We've all gone in, and I can speak from previous experience of my own, going into something new, and that excitement and overwhelm and all the other feelings just come out in setting unrealistic expectations and thinking you're going to change the entire company overnight. So none of you should feel as though any of this is wrong necessarily. And I'm treading on your toes here, Debbie, but it's kind of harnessing that and making sure that it's serving you well as the new employer.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, don't feel alone. They are the common mistakes that are made, and there are things that you can do to prevent you going down that route. So can you see my screen again with the desert now? Yeah, perfect. Okay, so one of the things is about understanding the expectations of you within the role. So quite often the job description, and you probably say this, Joe, the job description can quite often not really reflect the reality of the role. And so you can,
unless of course you come through 10-2, and then it's always perfect.
Exactly. But you can go in there with a bit of a confusion about, well, what is it exactly that I'm expected to do here? And you can make assumptions, and they can make assumptions, and then that's when things can go wrong. So I kind of feel like it's this sort of walking lonely in a desert, feeling a little bit lost, and then that's the point at which the self-doubt starts creeping in of, do they think I'm doing a good job? Am I doing the right thing? I'm not really sure which way to turn, but I don't want to mention that because then they'll think that I can't do the job, and that cycles around. So probably an obvious way to deal with this, but ask the question, have that conversation to say, okay, which direction do I need to be going in? And I've gone backwards. That was comedy direction there. So which direction do I need to be going in? And what are some of those key milestones along the way that you're expecting of me? And who can help me? Who can help to kind of direct me, so that it's not just all coming from your manager? Who else can help me? And what will be the performance measures that will tell me that I'm doing a good job? And making sure that you've got that clarity, and that you're going back and then checking and saying, how am I doing against those expectations, so that you've got that feedback as well. So building that trust and credibility that we really want to build. So I've got a very scientific test here. So when I move on to the next slide, I want you to use your reaction button and give me a clap or a wave if you trust these people. So are we ready? 3, 2, 1. Okay, so I'm not seeing. Yeah, we got we laughter here. Yeah.
Brilliant.
They're not a huge amount of trust.
I'm glad we're amongst like-minded people this evening.
Okay, and now I'm going to do another slide. So ready? 3, 2, 1. Do you trust this person?
Oh, lots of
love.
hearts.
Yeah.
Don't we just love Mr. Adams, sir?
Okay, brilliant. So we make judgments about people without knowing them. I don't know Boris, thankfully. And equally, I don't know David. So, you know, we make these judgments, we make these assessments without really knowing people. And there's a bit of work that was done by Charles Green, which said that trust equals credibility plus reliability plus intimacy divided by self-orientation. So what that means is, in terms of credibility, that's your skills, your experience, but it's also your willingness to say if you don't know the answer. So saying, I'm sorry, I don't know, but I have to come back to you, and then coming back to somebody can be better than, you know, blagging it and pretending. So skills, experience, and that kind of growth mindset. And reliability is the coming back to the person, but it's, you know, doing what you say you will. It's also attending meetings on time, responding to emails, information requests. So it's that reliability as well. And then intimacy in this scenario is about building rapport. So it's about asking people about their weekends, building those connections, and also about being a little bit vulnerable. And so actually, if you say, I'm new and I am feeling a little bit nervous, all of a sudden you go from the new scary person that's coming in and might change things and how they're going to fit in with our team to, oh, they're feeling nervous, let's look after them. So actually being a bit vulnerable can be really, really helpful. And how you deal with that remotely can be about things like joining a meeting 5 minutes early, so that you've got that moment to say hi to people, to say how was your weekend, staying on the end of a meeting just as it ends, you know, having those short moments. And then self-orientation is somebody who is only interested in themselves. So they don't ask others about their objectives, they don't ask about their support needs, they're maybe trampling on others to get to where they want to get to, not recognizing others' contributions. And so we're all sitting here going, well, I'm definitely not that person. But sometimes it can be about the fact that you're speaking more than other people in a meeting. You're not allowing those people time. And you think when you start a role and it's all about, I need to show my credibility, I need to make a good impression, it is all about self-orientation. And so it's being aware of that and thinking, actually, what I need to be doing is asking people about, well, what's worked well here before? What have been some of the challenges been here before? What are your objectives and how may I be able to support you in delivering those? How might my team be able to help you?
Debbie, we've had a question come through that kind of, I guess, could link in with what you were just talking about. One of our attendees has said that they always feel really stressed when starting a new job, but they'd like to understand how they can turn that stress into positive energy. I think when people are quite stressed, they can come across as being not necessarily interested in others, because that stress drives all of those traits you just talked about, you know, thinking about yourself quite a lot. Have you got any quick tips, and forgive me if you're coming on to this later, but have you got any quick tips on how to manage that stress into something more positive?
Yeah. When if you think about a stress response is, you know, you get potentially going into that threat mode. Your brain is, the part of your brain, the amygdala, has gone into that threat mode. Stress hormones are rushing around your body. You might be, you know, short of breath. You might have sweaty hands. You might be, you know, heart racing. And when that happens, that can actually kind of partially block the connection within your brain that goes to the part of the brain that does the kind of the rational thought, and those kind of that effective decision making and being able to kind of think about the situation from a sort of bigger picture perspective. And the easiest way to deal with that is to take a deep breath. So just noticing in your body what's happening to me, noticing, okay, my palms are getting a bit sweaty, I'm tensing up, I'm maybe breathing a bit shallowly. Notice those things and just take a deep breath. Take that deep breath, breathe in, breathe out, and that then starts to calm down that kind of stress response and helps you to think more clearly. But also, it's entirely natural to be feeling stressed in that situation, and it does, the adrenaline gets going, and so not panicking about that, not kind of be thinking, oh gosh, now I'm stressed and now everything's going to go, completely wrong. But it is that kind of step back. Okay, my body's stressed and it's natural for it to feel stressed. What can I do about it in this moment? And that deep breath is the simplest thing you can do, and it will start to kind of rebuild, calm down the stress hormones and rebuild that connection.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much.
Okay, so building these kind of key relationships. So obviously we want to be talking to people and asking them about things. So remember, think of it as being like a child and asking lots of questions. So be really curious, find out from them what it is that they need. And then also when you're talking to people, saying to them, is there anybody else you think I should be talking to? Because one of the things when you start an organisation is you don't have that network. You don't know who to go to get things done, and where you find things and that kind of thing. And the more people you speak to, the more connections you build, the stronger that support network is going to be for you. So saying to people when you speak to them, is there anybody else that you think that I should speak to? And then also asking your manager as well. And then what you can do is you can map those kind of key stakeholders. So you can map them on a quadrant like this. And again, this is in your workbook. So for the people that have a high interest in what you're doing and a high influence over it, they need to be actively engaged. So they need to be involved in decisions, ask their opinions, have regular meetings with them, gain their feedback. For the people who have a high interest, but maybe not such a high influence over what you're doing, then that's just about keeping them informed. So the regular updates. For people who have a low interest, but they have a high influence, you need to keep them happy. So asking them, well, because they've not got that much interest in it, but they have got influence over it, well, how do they want to be communicated with, and when do they want to be communicated with? What level of information do they need to know? And then give them those updates and the feedback, and get their feedback on those key points. And then remembering that the people with low interest and low influence still need monitoring, because something may happen. Suddenly the thing that you're working on may become their priority. So they may move into a different quadrant. So lastly, you need to have a plan. And you've probably heard about the kind of 30, 60, 90-day plan before. And so a plan gives you that kind of sense of certainty. It takes away some of the fear and the uncertainty when you're thrown into this new situation that's out of your comfort zone. So it gives you some boundaries, it gives you a sense of certainty. And within the first 30 days, what you need to be doing is diagnosing that situation. So thinking back to the not jumping in with the answer, but listening to others, meeting up with other people, finding out from them, building those relationships, and finding out what's the kind of most important thing from their perspective. Then days 30 to 60, you can then say, okay, well, I now have a feel of what's going on in the organisation. I've built some relationships. So what are some quick wins that I can put in place that give me that credibility, and who are the key resources that can support me? And then moving on to the last 30 days, reviewing those results and future planning. And with each of these, it's really important to be having these conversations with your manager so that you're really clear at the start, what are the key milestones they're expecting? This is what you're kind of planning. Is that in line with their expectations? This is now what you've done. What are their thoughts on how that went? And what should you be doing for the next 30 days? And keeping those conversations going. So in summary, prepare yourself manage those risks, understand expectations, build key relationships, establish credibility, and have a plan. That's it. Have we got any questions?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, first of all, before we move on to the Q&A. There was some amazingly useful advice in there, and I know that everyone will have taken something away. We have had some questions coming through. I've been furiously typing away while you've been talking. And we've got some time left to run through. So a kind of common theme, actually, that's been coming through is nervousness around looking stupid or annoying people by asking too many questions. And although you're saying it's good to ask questions and they're going to be helpful in the long run, I think that we can all feel embarrassed or shy, or we don't want to annoy people. Have you got any advice around that fear of annoying?
Yeah. I think when you start a new role, people are going to expect you to be asking questions, and actually quite often the questions that you ask can demonstrate your credibility, because you're asking the question that maybe they've not thought about, or making them think about things differently, or demonstrating that you've got knowledge in this area, and therefore you're asking questions that show that in some way. So I kind of, we are our own worst critics. I think we always perceive ourselves much more negatively than others perceive us. And so reframing that kind of thought process of I'm going to be annoying people to actually my aim of asking the question is to do a good job. They want me to do a good job. I want to do a good job. And therefore, the purpose of me asking this question is to enable me to do that. And if I can do that, I can go off and get on with it and then not annoy them. So I think there's a, yes, it's worth kind of preparing your questions and thinking about, what are the questions that I might want to ask this person that I've arranged a call with before you go into the call. And then obviously anything else that kind of comes up in there, so that you're sort of prepared. But I would kind of try and reframe it to the benefit of me asking the question is that I can go off and do my job effectively. And that's what everybody wants.
Perfect. Great answer. And another widely asked subject area that I think we could, in fact, we do have a separate podcast on, but just a couple of words from your wisdom, if you may. Any tips on dealing with imposter syndrome?
Yeah, so I mean, imposter syndrome is kind of the gap between what you think you should be, how you think you should be acting, and how you feel that you act. And it's really tough. It's not something that's a real quick fix. It's definitely not a real quick fix. But the way in which to kind of manage that is to have a bit of an understanding of, okay, so sometimes you might say to somebody, okay, so what a project manager, what does a good project manager look like? And they will list out for you a whole load of things about what a good project manager looks like. And then you can kind of say, well, okay, so now tell me about which of these things you you can do. So where are your strengths in relation to that? And you can kind of rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, or okay, well, I've rated myself here. And then you can then say, okay, well, what has got you? So say you say, okay, I'm only going to rate myself a 4 out of 10 on this one. Say, well, what has got you to the 4? What have been the things that have got you to the 4? So rather than focusing on the gap, focus on the positives and the strengths that have got you to the 4 in the first place. So that you're kind of taking it from a strengths-based approach the whole time, and trying to kind of take away some of that. I should be like this, and also widening your scope of what a project manager looks like. So going out and speaking to other project managers because you quite often have quite a tunnel vision view of what you think a good project manager looks like. And so going and speaking to other people about how they do it and how they approach it, and you'll realise that there are lots of different ways of approaching it, and what you need to find is what's right for you, and what's, you know, what project management looks like within your world for you, with the strengths that you've got, because you will have your own strengths that you can bring to it.
It's a really practical and quite unique way of approaching it. I love that idea of flipping things and looking at how far you've come rather than focusing on what you perceive you still have to do.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. We've got lots and lots more questions, but I'm afraid that we are pretty much out of time now. We did promise that we'd let you all get off and enjoy your evenings. And we've taken plenty of your time this evening, Debbie. So, as I said, we will come back to questions either individually if they are quite specific, or via a Q&A in the coming days. As I'll top and tail. So I'm Jo Gregory, Ten2Two part-time recruitment specialists. There have been a couple of questions specifically about part-time, which I will come back to you individually on, because it's my passion and they've got me a bit riled up. So I will be tapping away to you tomorrow. If you have the time or the inclination and you would be happy to review us, then you can do so on our Facebook page or on Google. We would really, really appreciate your reviews. Similarly, if you want to follow Debbie, her details are there and you can get in touch with her. She'll be happy to answer any further questions, or point you in the right direction if it's something that she can guide you on. Thank you all ever so much. Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your evenings, and please do get in touch if you need anything further. Oh, and thank you for all the reactions. That's lovely.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.